Join me as we continue through the pages of this fascinating book about the Dukeries of Nottinghamshire, written originally in the 1970s by Roger A. Redfern and published by Dalesman. We're going to look now at Chapter 12, Forest Settlements. Of all the settlements of the area, Mansfield can claim to be the forest town, the market centre of ancient Sherwood. What we see today as a rather scattered and disunited town with much industry and nearby collieries hides greatly the former attractions. The Romans were well established here, as evidenced by the fine Roman villa excavated at nearby Mansfield Woodhouse in the last century, and by the numerous finds of Roman coins. In 1154, Mansfield was granted to Ranulph, Earl of Chester, and during the next century a Monday market was granted by King Henry VIII. The obvious place to visit in Mansfield is the lovely church of St. Peter, with its rather blunt steeple. Much of the building is Norman, in fact, though the work of the 13th century is most conspicuous on inspection. The centre of the town is dominated by the Victorian railway viaduct striding over the rooftops. One of the high arches acts as a shapely frame for the parish church when looking down Church Street from the corner of the marketplace. The coming of industrialisation brought size to this town and ugliness and grime. Today the place looks much cleaner, and gems of the past remain here and there to link Mansfield with its rural origins. At the centre of the marketplace stands a monument to Lloyd George Bentinck, younger brother of the 5th Duke of Portland, erected in 1849, a year after his death. 7 miles to the northeast of Mansfield lies the famous forest village of Edwinstowe, now sadly scarred by the exploitation of the Nottinghamshire coalfield in the immediate vicinity. The area headquarters of the National Coal Board's North Nottinghamshire area is situated near the centre of the village, but the oldest part of the settlement naturally lies close beside the parish church of St. Mary, traditional site of the marriage of the fabulous Robin Hood and Maid Marian. More factual is the existence of the north wall of the nave of the forest measure, a scale carved in the stone to record forever the measure as applied to areas of Sherwood Forest. In 1298 it was fixed as 1 foot equaling 18 inches, and 21 of these feet equaling 1 perch. Edwinstowe is reputed to be the burial place of Edwin, first Christian king of Northumbria, killed in October 633 AD. Some 11 miles to the southeast of Mansfield, and close by the fringe of the area covered herein, stands noble Southwell, a venerable market town and religious centre which has altered very little down the years. In 1537 it was situated right on the eastern boundary of the Royal Forest of Sherwood, but it is now many miles east of the remaining forest lands. The great glory of the town is the Minster, best seen looking north from the 200-foot-high ridge at Brackenhurst. The towers and spires rise from the lowland landscape as a great ship above water, and in pale winter sunlight the copper-covered roofs shine conspicuously. The present building dates from about 1108, though it did not become a cathedral until 1884. Its greatest glories are the chapter house and its wonderful portal with the finest foliage carving, about 1290, to be found anywhere in Britain, and the intricate and accurate nature carving on the ends of the choir stalls in the chancel, worth a few minutes' examination, particularly when there is bright sunlight to illuminate the detail. The first bishop was Dr. George Ridding, consecrated 1884, died 1904, who lived at lovely Thurgerton Priory, 3 miles south of Southwell. Since 1909, the bishops have lived at the Bishop's Palace, adjoining the Minster on the south side, built 1907-9, and incorporating the ruins of the original palace, which was built between 1360 and 1430. About 20 miles to the north of Southwell is the thriving market centre of Retford. To be accurate, it is East Retford because it is quieter, and lesser sister across the River Idle is West Retford. Here is an old settlement at the very eastern edge of our territory, well known for its market, but architecturally something of a disappointment. Part of this lack of appeal stems from the Great Fire which swept away much of medieval Retford in 1528. The parish church of St. Swithin was damaged by fire twice in the 16th century, and in 1651 its tower collapsed in a great gale. Much of the present church dates from 19th century restoration, although the 100-foot tower was put up in 1658, only 7 years after the fall of the old one. In the market square are the offices of Henry Spencer and Sons, one of the leading firms of auctioneers and fine art dealers in the country. Mr. Rupert Spencer is one of the best known and best liked characters in Nottinghamshire. His kindness, respect and skill make the great country house sales which he conducts memorable and educational events. His recent book, Drama at the Sale, highlights some of his many memories of people and places, particularly in this part of the country. 6 miles to the north-west of East Retford, along the course of the old Great North Road, lies Blyth. This is the northernmost settlement of importance in the area described here, actually at the same latitude as Sheffield Centre and 17 miles to the east of it. The great building to see at Blyth is the Priory Church of St. Mary and St. Martin, one of the best examples of a northern church anywhere. It was built about 1088, at the same time as the Benedictine Priory was founded here by Roger de Bousely, great Norman Baron of Tickhill Castle. Its ruins are some 4 miles to northwest, over the South Yorkshire border. This priory was subordinate to St. Catherine's Priory at Rouen and housed 24 Benedictine monks. It is generally considered that there is nothing to outdo Blyth's parish church for Norman grimness. Maybe so, but it is a fascinating and lovable building, particularly for the cavernous vistas in the early Norman aisles and a 15th century painting of Mary Magdalene by Fra Bartolomeo hanging on the north side of the high altar. After the restoration, the whole of the eastern part of the church was pulled down and a blank wall with a great arch erected. On the outside, this eastern end housed a large aviary in the last century, forming part of the grounds of Blyth Hall, which stood close to the northern side of the church. This northern side of the building shows traces of the cloisters, and there are the tombs of Roger de Bousely and his wife. Blyth Hall dated from about 1700, a rather ugly red brick mansion long the home of the illustrious Mellish family, who lived also at Hodsock Priory, a mile to the southwest. The hall was a sadly romantic sort of place, derelict for many years, before demolition in 1972. The entire complex of the parish church, the site of the former priory, and the adjoining hall was a place of melancholy, somewhat altered by the very recent developments in the grounds of the mansion. And so to the last settlement of the district, to Worksop, Filmythe, southwest of Blyth, and gathered about the slow water of the River Ryton. The most important building is the large Priory Church of St. Mary and St. Cuthbert, which was founded in 1103. Before that, the 2 manors of Worksop were granted by William I to the powerful Roger de Bousely mentioned above. The later history of the district is largely the development of Worksop Manor. The church was once of great length, but much of the east end has gone now, although the Lady Chapel was reunited with the rest of the building in 1929. The early 14th century gatehouse is a lovelier building than the church. It stands adjacent to the market cross, which probably dates from the granting of Worksop Market in 1296. Until 1891, the road ran under the gatehouse. Its main purpose was to act as a portal for priory and town, and here travellers could stay overnight in the guest chamber over the archway, cared for by a monk. It is one of a handful of such gatehouses left in this country, and a particularly fine example on account of its oriel window and niches occupied by weathered figures. This fine medieval building is the one copied so romantically by the 4th Duke of Portland in 1844 in the forest north of Clipston village. At the southern fringe of the town stands Worksop College, a Church of England public school for boys, founded by Canon Nathaniel Woodard in 1890. The site was donated by the 7th Duke of Newcastle as it formed part of the northern extremity of his Clumber Park estate. At the southeastern corner of the complex is the Great Chapel, a gift of Lord Mountgarret dating from 1909. The school has about 380 boarders. Worksop has long been known as the gateway of the Dukeries, and how accurate this claim is can be appreciated when looking out from the south front of Worksop College, with wide views of the broken woodland which forms part of the estates of Clumber, Welbeck and Worksop Manor. Chapter 13. Underground Wealth. The rich orange sandstone which lies so near to the surface of a large proportion of the area here described can be seen exposed wherever natural weathering or burrowing by man has taken place. Several roads pass through shallow cuttings where the bunter sandstone outcrops in soft and crumbling walls near King John's Palace at Clipston, where the A6009 climbs towards Welbeck Abbey's Lion Gates at Sparkenhill, Worksop, and on the Southwell Road out of Mansfield. This soft sandstone has been used for building construction, but is so soft as to be dreadfully short-lived. It is almost as unsatisfactory for this as it is as soil when broken down by weathering. The medieval inhabitants of Sherwood and the later noble landowners never suspected that beneath this infertile country lay vast quantities of fuel. Today, the North Nottinghamshire coalfield is the most productive and most profitable in the country. The great asset of the industry is that, because it developed here relatively recently, advantage has been taken of modern technology to keep to a minimum its intrusion on otherwise unspoilt countryside. The first pit to be sunken in this area was at Teversall, near Sutton in Ashfield, in 1868. It now employs 800 men and produces about 650,000 tonnes of coal annually. Several others were sunk before the Great War, and Clipston Colliery was sunk between 1920 and 1922, with two of the tallest winding headstocks in the country at 214 feet and two at the deepest shafts at 1,006 yards. Its 1,560 men produce almost 1.2 million tonnes of coal annually. Other collieries include Rufford, 1911 to 1913, Welbeck, 1912 to 15, and Thoresby, 1925 to 28, the latter employing 1,600 men and producing 1.3 million tonnes annually. The most recent colliery, though, is at the eastern border of our region. Bevercoats, near the River Medden, and 3 miles northwest was Tuxford, was sunk between 1953 and 1958, is almost 1,000 yards deep, and will eventually produce 1.5 million tonnes from the Parkgate seam. It is one of the most modern pits in Europe. At the adjacent Lound Hall, the National Coal Board has a training centre, and this is now the home of the NCB Mining Museum. Further north, coal mining became important at a slightly earlier date, the South Yorkshire Railway being developed to carry the coal produced from the Barnsley seams, called Top Hard in the North Nottinghamshire area. At the turn of the century, Dinnington was a village of 250 people. In 1900, the mineral rights were bought from the Duke of Leeds of Kiverton Park and the Earl of Scarborough of Sanderbeck Park by the Sheepbridge Coal and Iron Company and the Sheffield Coal Company. The first shaft was sunk at Dinnington in 1902, and in the world record time of 23 months, the Barnsley seams had been reached 2,000 feet below the surface. The Sheepbridge Coal and Iron Company sank pits at Maltby Wood, 1908, and Rossington, 1912, and Furbeck after 1918, and in all invested £750,000 in collieries in these years. Between the two world wars, the Sheepbridge Staveley Group produced almost 2 million tonnes of coal per year and was by far the largest producer in Britain. All of this changed with nationalisation after World War II. Between 1918 and 1922, there was a programme of exploration for crude oil, but results from this eastern flank of the Pennine anticline, or upfold, proved disappointing. Only with later test borings for coal did the productive oil fields and oil wells of Nottinghamshire come into being. An anticline of carboniferous rocks has its crest in the Eakering district, 2 miles southeast of Rufford Abbey. Here, oil was struck in 1939 at 2,000 feet below the surface, and by 1949, almost 600,000 tonnes had been produced from 250 wells. Since 1964, the wells at Eakering and nearby Duke's Wood have declined in production from more than 13,000 tonnes in 1964 to 465 tonnes in 1969, while the more recent wells at Egmonton, a mile south of Tuxford, have been yielding between 27,000 in 1964 and 14,500 tonnes in 1969. After the water has been extracted, the dry oil is pumped into 14-ton rail tankers at Bilsthorpe and Tuxford, and these carry it to the BP refinery at Pumferston near Edinburgh. The fourth underground treasure is water. Here is a relatively low rainfall district, which averages about 27 inches per year. It is likely that about 1/3 of the rainfall seeps down into the sandstone, and only some of this can be pumped out to provide water for the mains of the district. The Central Nottinghamshire Water Board has 16 sources of supply. The most productive boreholes, including ones at Budby, adjoining Thoresby Park, 3 million gallons a day, and Farnsfield, 2.3 million gallons a day. This water is moderately hard in character and is pumped into service reservoirs throughout the district. And now we're on the final chapter of our walk through the Dukeries of Nottinghamshire. This is chapter 14, Through the Trees. There are 56,500 acres of woodland in Nottinghamshire, of which the largest proportion is classed as scrub, containing broad-leafed species of little commercial value. Less than half the true woodland is coniferous high forest, though the proportion of planted conifers is increasing. After 999-year leases were negotiated by the Forestry Commission with the Welbeck and Rufford estates, planting started in 1925. The largest blocks of maturing coniferous high forest are in the Clipston and Rufford forests to the east of Mansfield. Hardwoods, particularly beech, have been planted in the forests of the area, but 3/5 of the plantations consist of Corsican pine, well suited to the poor sandy soils and best able to cope with air pollution from the industrial districts to the west. At present, the Forestry Commission is planting or restocking 160 acres of forest in the Sherwood area each year, and felled timber produces about 2.3 metric tonnes, or 2,300 metric tonnes annually. Extensive coniferous plantations do not have the variety or texture of natural habitats for flora and fauna that mixed or pure broad-leaved woodlands possess. The two scenic weaknesses of the area are these rather drab, dark, and featureless coniferous plantations, and the lack of contours of tumbled country with sudden vistas and points of focus. The particular charm of the Dukeries country is its unchanged countenance in many corners. Great estates upon which great wealth has been lavished down the years, though most of them have now declined and present that mellow melancholy of this true aspidistra land. Each traveller will carry his own favourite mental vistas. Mine are of the dark silhouettes of Coote trotting over the ice on Clumber Lake on a bleak February day, of my first coming to Ossington and my fruitless search in the abandoned garden for the hall some years after it had been demolished, and of the tumbled pile of timber in Welbeck Park, which is all that remains of the Greendale oak, once the greatest tree of ancient Sherwood. In the end, I came to Little St. Winifred's at Holbeck and looked at the Portland graves in their truly lovely setting amid small topiary and level grass. Look out to the east, and through the ranks of many multicoloured winter woods, the complex roofs of Welbeck Abbey peep between 1,000 branches. Beyond, the steeper woods climb upon Hag Hill and Titchfield Hill to the place called Roomwood, still the home of a duke.